Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today, we talk about One Iowa and the LGBTQ community. Malycki Manon-Sosa, program coordinator with One Iowa, is building bridges that can help heal Iowa's need to evolve a compassionate relationship with the LGBTQ community. Let's welcome Malycki from One Iowa as he shares his story and ideas for a healthier Iowa. Malycki, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in the small Eastern Iowa town called Kelmis, and that was a really kind of what paved my way to becoming who I am. It's a small, very small rural town, majority white, and majority Christian, all of that fun stuff, right? Things that we're very familiar with in Iowa. And so being in that small town environment, I started to realize that one, I was a little bit different than everyone else, not only because of maybe who I was attracted to, but more so what I looked like. I'm a proud Afro-Latino man, and a son of an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. So with that being said, there comes a lot of ramifications along with that. But being in the small Eastern Iowa town of Kelmis really shed light on not only the inequities that I was experiencing, but maybe what other people were experiencing in the world. And that was somewhat humbling, right? To say, you know what, I'm different from everyone else. And it may not always be easy, but it was something that I was proud of. I was proud to stick out a little bit more, and maybe get some attention when I was younger. But that being said, it really inspired me to say, you know what, there's so many inequities that I have yet to learn about, which really shifted me towards kind of the path that I took when I chose to start studying in university. And so when I went to college, I went to Loras College, a small Catholic institution, still here in Iowa. And that was also an eye-opener, right? A majority of folks who went to Loras were white Catholic individuals who are from richer suburbs of the Chicagoland area. And so myself, who was someone who lived below the poverty line, was a person of color, and obviously was also openly gay at the time. I really had to step back and say, what is this world that I'm living in? And why is it so hard, not only for me, but people who look like me, people who sound like me, people who love like me, right? And so at Loras, I was inspired to take on the initiative of working with an honors group. And that group, we really focused on immigrant and refugees in Eastern Iowa, specifically to the Dubuque area. And if you don't know anything about the Dubuque area of Iowa, there's a large Marshallese and Guatemalan Honduran population. And so really focusing on health equities for those groups of folks. Again, really coming back to my roots of being a son of an immigrant. And that's kind of what led me to end up where I am now as program coordinator at One Iowa. It was my senior year, and I was going through COVID at that time, right? COVID was big. And so I was just scrolling through social media and saw that a job was open at One Iowa. And I thought, you know what? I have to get prepared to start interviewing for jobs once I graduate. So what better way to do that than to just start applying for random jobs? So applied to One Iowa, went through that process, right? And it was really my background in health literacy for the immigrant and refugee population that propelled me into this job, that got me this job. And this job really is focused on community outreach and understanding the health inequities of Iowa, specifically for our LGBTQ community, which I know we'll get to talk about shortly. But yeah, so that's what ended me up here at One Iowa, working in LGBTQ advocacy, a little bit different than our refugee and migrant population disparities, but I think still of the same, working for the people.
Fascinating. I too am a son of immigrants. And so, and I grew up in the Chicago area. And as a Catholic, I mean, it's a lot of buttons you're touching on here are very similar. But there's a fascinating relationship here. Is that it's interesting and it's very forward thinking to see Iowa have this role.
Yeah.
and move forward on these initiatives. In many ways, it's heartwarming to see that there's an effort being expended in the work that you do. Is this sort of a novel approach for the state of Iowa? Is this something new, your role?
Yeah, so this was completely new. It was a grant by funded by the CDC, the Iowa Department of Public Health, now Iowa Department of Health and Human Services, excuse me, had applied for this grant, and this grant was all about looking at disparities in health within your state, and they got a list of priority groups to choose from, so those groups being people of color, Native and Indigenous folks, right, and then LGBTQ community. There was a huge plethora of options that they chose. They chose LGBTQ folks and said, hey, One Iowa, here's this grant fund, hire someone to do this work. And so that's what created my role. So yeah, it was a novel. It's a pretty new thing for Iowa to have such a role.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to take a short break and continue our conversation with Malycki from One Iowa. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're with Malycki from One Iowa, and we're discussing the state of LGBTQ life in Iowa, from the perspective of an Iowa evolving to meet the future in a practical and compassionate way. Now that sounds really good, Malycki, but the fact is the practicality of dealing with these issues isn't a simple thing to understand. Can you get us a little more information on that?
Yeah, so I think let's start with compassion, right? Most people, right, just want to love everyone, right? That's something we hear often when we're talking about the LGBTQ community, right? Love is love. And while that's great, that's compassionate, that's understanding, it's not practical. And you might be thinking, in what way is that not practical, right? How is me loving someone not practical? Or how is me wanting someone else to be able to love whoever they want to love not practical? And it's not practical in this sense because here, at least in Iowa, we have a lot going on. And when I say a lot going on, I'm talking about a lot going on in the sense that our LGBTQ community is under attack. And I choose those words very, very very lightly, right? And I'm using them because that's truly what is happening, is our LGBTQ community is under attack. And so, right, what does that mean? I'm saying the practical sense, right? If you want to support LGBTQ people in our state, we have to be active allies. And what does that mean? I know it's another like lingo word. An active ally to me is someone who shows up for our community. And in Iowa, we're just not seeing enough of that. We have a lot of people saying, you know what, I'm here to support y'all, especially in the work that I do. Some people will say, here's a donation for the work you do, and think that's enough for supporting the LGBTQ community. And I hope that we all understand that just throwing money at a problem doesn't always solve it. And so that's really the difference there between while you might be thinking you're being compassionate by giving whatever it might be, in the practical sense, is that helping the community? And my simple answer to that right now is no. That's not enough for LGBTQ Iowans.
Well, what do you think is at the core of the issue from a humanistic point of view, looking at the culture and the history, because we see the same problems in big cities that we like to think they're more progressive. People are people. But if we look at a human being, if we have somebody listening on the show, which we hope we will, and there's also children in classrooms that listen to the show, they may themselves be part of that problem that doesn't put themselves out there or wants to believe that somehow they don't have to do anything. But as a core, looking at a perspective of, well, somebody like me, an old white Catholic guy, I mean, if you look at that, what do you see as the core of the problem? Not to say you're blaming anybody or calling them evil, but what do you think needs to change?
I think what really needs to change is understanding that we can live our own happy, long lives, right, without negatively impacting the lives of others. And how is this happening in Iowa specifically? We have so many people who just want to do good, who want to live their long, happy lives, right? But then not realizing that there's a lot of privilege in being able to do that, right? Kind of to put it in perspective, right? As a straight individual, we're able, right? I'm using that as a broader term. I'm not straight, but as a straight individuals are able to walk down the street, hold hands with someone and not even consider it. Or, right, cisgender folks who aren't transgender or non-binary, folks walking out in public, don't even have to think about, am I safe, right? You go to the grocery store to pick up a carton of milk, you don't think, is this the day that someone attacks me? And this is something that happens with our LGBTQ community. And so that's why, like, I'm a strong proponent for saying, like, if you're not a part of the LGBTQ community, right, there's a lot that you should be doing to support the LGBTQ community, because there's a lot of privilege in being able, right, to just go out in public and think, I'm safe. There's so much privilege in that. And even in light of recent events with what happened in Colorado Springs, that should be an example right there, right? How often do you think, if I go out tonight to a local bar, I'll be a victim, right, of gun violence? And so unfortunately, that's truly where, like, the understanding lies, a lack of understanding. And I think education is a key way for us to kind of move ourselves forward, right? Take a moment to stop in our lives and say, I want to learn about the lives of someone else. I want to know what someone else is experiencing. And that kind of comes in with the compassionate piece, right? And it's a little bit more practical to say, I can ask someone about their lived experience and maybe learn from that, right?
So as I understand it, then for Iowa, getting the message out there, getting the stories out there, getting the people to earn compassion, even though maybe, in a perfect world, they wouldn't have to. Is this something you see as the mission?
Oh yeah, in my mind, yes. Like, getting the messages, getting the stories out there is so important, but it's also important to understand that sharing these stories also makes those people a target in our state, right? Being able to say, hey, this is my story, may make us a target for individuals who may not agree with what's going on in our lives.
Well, we're going to take a short break. We're going to ask Malycki to share his vision for One Iowa and what he sees can be done to make Iowa a more compassionate and healthy place to live for the LGBTQ community. See you all after the break.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here.
Wait. What?
I can't drive.
Why?
My.
Oh.
Not all internet is priced this good. Switch to Extreme and go super fast for as low as $19.99 a month for a year. Oh yeah, hook up your home with powerful Wi-Fi, 99.99% reliability, and speeds that are FCC proven to be faster than advertised. Not all internet is priced this good. Switch today and get speeds starting at 100 meg for as low as $19.99 a month for a year. Call 844-EXTREME2 for details.
Welcome back. We're talking with Malycki from One Iowa about the LGBT community and some of the things all Iowans need to know, because these are impacts and things that Malycki's are talking about are important to all Iowans. Malycki, continue the conversation.
Yeah. So why is it important to all Iowans? I know you just mentioned that. And so I really want to start us off with Iowa's LGBTQ health needs assessment that went live in 2022 in relation to this grant that was funded by the CDC. And this was a survey that surveyed the entirety of the state and really asked questions specific to the LGBTQ community. It was a survey for the community of by the community, right? And so that told us so much about what was going on in our state and how it can really impact others as well.
What are some of the key points that you learned from that assessment?
Yeah, so some of the key takeaways, right, is one, almost 45% of LGBTQ Iowans have been victims of physical assault, right? And that's all based on their LGBTQ identity, right? And that means, right, LGBTQ Iowans, that's almost a 1 in 2, right, number there. That means LGBTQ Iowans are unsafe being LGBTQ in their home state.
You know, and this is a major disparity. Now, that also must create mental health issues. I mean, at the school level, when we talk about children and educating children, we try and get ahead of issues like that to reduce the impacts. But what we see now is that the LGBTQ community is immersed in those impacts. So it's not a matter of avoiding the impacts as much as it is to prevent them, but also a lot of healing that probably has to go hand in hand for the future. How does One Iowa approach that?
Yeah, so we specifically look at LGBTQ health as a whole, and we have an annual health and wellness conference. This is all about educating medical providers. So I'm talking psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, even your primary healthcare physician on what's going on with LGBTQ folks and how they can care for us effectively in our state. I'm proud to announce that our statewide LGBTQ health and wellness conference is now going regional to a Midwest health and wellness conference. So there's a lot of great stuff going on in our state that can help educate folks on what the outcomes of LGBTQ health truly are.
When is this conference typically held?
This conference is typically held in the spring, but this regional conference this year is looking to be held in the fall. So be on the lookout for that. You can get more information about events such as our Regional Health and Wellness Conference at oneiowa.org.
Now, can people in the community find help and resources on your website as well?
Yeah, so we have resources for parents of LGBTQ individuals who might want to learn more about the community, right? Those are all things that can also be found on our website at oneiowa.org/resources.
Now, how are you dealing with, what we see in the news is a lot of pushback from parents on even dealing with these issues. And they've sort of made schools a battleground. And I got to think that with the impacts you're talking about, you're dealing with a very large adult population that's dealing with these issues. Does One Iowa also get engaged in the younger population of Iowans?
Yeah, so we educate, for example, we educate schools, we educate parents. For example, parents sometimes reach out to us and we'll have like just sessions with them and say, here's what you need to know about what's going on with your kiddo. Those are things that we do. And we even have other materials as well that are for children to learn a bit more about who they are, maybe, right, and maybe what they're experiencing. And so that's a little bit about what we do. Iowa also has a great organization, Iowa Safe Schools, who does a lot of great work for our LGBTQ youth in the school system.
So when we're looking at dealing with this idea, we have stigma. We know the general population has stigmatized these issues, but are there also stigmas within the issues within the community for dealing with, say, Health and Human Services or One Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, even in the community in and of itself, especially highlighting so much of what happened in the AIDS epidemic, right? Our community has a lot of resentment maybe, or maybe fear in engaging with an entity, right, that may have any sort of connection to a government agency, such as we do right now, right, in the work that I do. And so we really have to be forward in saying, hey, you know what, we're here in the community being present, and here are the resources that we're providing. So that way, even the stigmas in our own community can start to dissipate, and there's some more trust between our organization and the community, right? It's easy for me to be LGBTQ and say, here's why you should listen to me, but it changes the game a little bit when you find out I'm working for an organization that's related to the government.
All right, a quick answer. Is One Iowa out there for kids like you were when you were growing up?
My short answer to that short question is I sure hope so. My initiative is to make sure that we have resources in every corner of our state, because no kid should feel like they can't be themselves ever.
That's a great point. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to ask Malycki to share some final comments, insights, and inspiration. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power, and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared, and you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about building bridges that can help heal Iowa's need to evolve a compassionate relationship with the LGBTQ community. Let's hear what insights, advice, and inspiration Malycki has to share. Malycki, the podium is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, first and foremost, I want to say if you're LGBTQ in this great state of Iowa, know that this state is a home for you, and will continue to be a home for you as long as we keep doing the work that we do. And maybe if you're not LGBTQ, you might have heard some of the things that I was saying earlier and think, why does this matter to me, right? Why does it matter to me if I don't have a connection to the community? And I can relate that straightforward and say, Iowa has continued to show that maybe this state isn't home for people who aren't white, who aren't straight, who aren't Christian, and who aren't cisgender. And so what does that mean, right? It means people who are young, right? Younger generations are more likely to identify as something other than white, straight, or cisgender. And so what does that mean? It means people who look like me, people who are me, right, typically aren't staying in this state, which means that Iowa will continue to get older, will continue to get whiter, and maybe that's great for you, right? And you might be thinking, that doesn't really impact me, but it does. It impacts our workforce development, right? It means we'll have no young folks to take the roles that our senior, right, directors of whatever CEO, while they go to retire, right, they'll have no one to replace them. And that means that businesses will then leave Iowa. And that means Iowa's economy will collapse. And so you might be thinking, how does that work, right? This all comes back down to LGBTQ folks. It actually comes down to diversity, right? The diversity of our state. And we have to take pride in that as Iowans, right? We all, I'm sure, have heard of the term Iowa nice. It's time to start acting like we're nice, right? And not start or not being that passive aggressive nice that so many folks who are in communities such as my own experience day in and day out. Let's start being nice to one another. And that will really truly help grow our state, right? And help people who look like me, people who love like me, people who are me stay in this great state of Iowa.
Now, we talk about this from the point of your program and the LGBTQ community, but in fact, it sounds like the message is true for people from different ethnic backgrounds, from people with different religious backgrounds. that there's really no doubt that the population of America is changing. And the majority is shrinking simply because new ideas, new people, new innovations are coming. Do you feel as strongly that this message would resonate with all people that face these challenges?
I do believe it would. I believe that anyone who's facing not maybe a challenge in accepting, but or maybe even a challenge just being who they are, right? It comes down to the fact of the matter is, if we don't embrace diversity, if we don't embrace equity or inclusion, right, our state and even our world, right, won't function. So if you want to be a part of the world of the future is a diverse, beautiful place. And we have to start educating not only our youth, but ourselves on that diversity.
Now, obviously, you grew up in a small town in Iowa, and you chose to stay in Iowa, in a sense, give back to Iowa. And that may or may not be the trend amongst LGBTQ youth. I don't know. But how do you feel? Do you feel hopeful that this is, I mean, I sense an underlying almost tiredness because you're facing some huge hurdles, and this is a big job. But how do you feel? How hopeful are you about the future in Iowa?
Right now, I think with recent events, recent going-ons in our state, I would say that our people have, specifically the LGBTQ population, has a long road ahead of us. And the only way that I can remain hopeful is having allies, strong, active allies willing to speak up and speak out for us, because doing this work makes me a target, makes my loved ones a target, right? For folks who believe that hate is the way to go about interacting with others. And so I'm hopeful that in the future, things will change, because people such as myself and other great people doing amazing work for our marginalized populations in our state, they're sticking around. And I hope that my energy and my drive continues to allow me to stick around and do this great work. But I only have hope if I'm able to also take a break and have an ally stick up for me when I need it. That's the only way we can be hopeful in this state.
Malycki, thank you so much for sharing your message here today. And thank you all for watching. Check out our website at healthyiowa.org and keep your eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration on Mediacom MC22, your local programming leader.